Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. Today we welcome back special guest Maestro David Dworkin, who has led orchestras across America and abroad and has performed around the world. Maestro David is a graduate of the Juilliard School and Columbia University Teachers College. He began his career as a clarinetist, and much of his career has been devoted to working with young people and older adults. Today, he's combining his lifelong passion for conducting, performing, educating, and physical fitness through his award-winning conductor size.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We are in the midst of an exciting episode and learning so much about of course, about Maestro David Dworkin, but about his past and about the whole area of music and motion and the brain and our mood and our health. It just goes on and on. We're just having a heck of a time here. Thank you for being here, David. We have more questions for you.
Wonderful. I'm ready.
You're talking a lot about older adults, but you work with more than just older adults. I happen to know you are a fabulous storyteller and narrator of children's stories. And before I ask you my question, surprise, we have a clip. So this is Maestro David Dworkin as the duck.
It is a glorious day, the sun bright and smiling, the water glistening, the air pure and still. Spring is come to the park, bringing warmth and smells and colors that were hidden all winter. Suddenly, Francois could not contain himself any longer. He felt such joy that he started to run. Faster and faster and faster. As he gathered speed, he felt his feet hardly touched the ground. And then, quack, quack, he was flying. Frenchie loved music, all kinds of music from Beethoven to hip-hop, swinging salsa to the big band sound. Today, he felt very, very jazzy. With sounds of a jazz clarinet in his ears, he flew straight up. He made a wide turn and in rhythm flew over the lake. Once, twice, 3 times. Well, he thought, isn't this the best? But being a good daddy duck, he returned to the shore of the lake. Frenchie wanted to make sure his family was safe and in sight. So he returned to the ground and started his walk once again.
So that was fabulous. I had no idea you had such skills and the different voices and accents. So I want to talk about some of the projects you're doing as far as bringing music to children. Number one, what are you working on? And what inspired it?
Well, it's called Etudes to Spring, was a work written a number of years ago by a good friend and colleague, bassoonist. He wrote, and composer, he wrote this work for unaccompanied bassoon. 15 short etudes, concert etudes. You could play them on stage, not just for technique. And each one has a title, the duck, the squirrel, the Spanish dancer, the dance of the honeybee, one of my favorites, and so on, the ghost of blue shingles. And a number of years ago, I was working at a place called the Graham School in the Bronx. And the kids that went to the Graham School, it was a school, I believe even kindergarten or first grade, right through high school. But these students had a choice, most of them, of going to jail or going to the school. They were substance abuse children. There were heart-wrenching stories with these kids. And this was a program started by my son-in-law, actually, Gene Bowen, Road Recovery, who works with substance abuse and music and children. And he asked me whether I would participate in an after-school program. So I did. And the biggest surprise for the kids is that we came back every week because, they weren't used to adults coming back. And it was quite an experience. I did it for 2 years. And at the end of each session, we would have a presentation. So I was working on them with all kinds of things. And they were working on reading as well with music. And I said, gee, I have these etudes to spring because I had asked the composer if I could edit and arrange the work for unaccompanied clarinet, which was my instrument, which he said, yes, do it. I got it copywritten, and there are 15 musical selections. So I played the duck, and they seemed to like it. And they said, if you wrote a story to the duck, at the end, you can play it and we'll read it, which happened. And then after that, I was encouraged to write a story for each one. And I guess they're children's stories with a point. There's one called The Lake, which is about beavers. And I try to tell them about work their principles of how they have to work together and how they build these things, and et cetera, life in general, the discipline of running, the duck that just enjoys life, enjoys his family, but loves to soar over the lake in a jazzy way. So that's how that happened. And yes, I'm working on trying to publish those etudes to spring with narration. And I love to narrate. I love to imitate voices and accents, etc.
Yeah, and you teach them, so not only life lessons, a fun story, but also a little bit about music.
Yeah, and kids, unfortunately, in our world, when there's a budgetary problem, and this is when I used, because of the pandemic, I haven't been going out, but I did travel the country quite a bit, and I would talk to school boards and music teachers. And guess what? If there's a budgetary problem, music is probably the first thing to go. Unfortunately, art is right up there with, well, we don't really need that. That's not one of our goals. And what drives Dr. John Rady crazy is that they're eliminating phys ed from some of the programs, which is absolutely nuts. So we have to, and that's another reason I wanted to do Conductor's Eyes too. It's a way of introducing children to great music. You don't have to tell them everything about the composers, etc. And I think I told Roger, my first experience was in the 6th grade with Mrs. Cornetta, who at 1 o'clock always played something musical and would play the Grand Canyon Suite and On the Trail, boom, dee-dom, dee-dom, dee-dom. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And one other story that I recall from Graham School. I took my group of kids, about 12 of them, with the staff member to an open rehearsal of the New York Philharmonic. And we're going down by bus through the ghettos of the Bronx, and they're saying, hi, that's where I used to live. And we get there and they're in the audience. And I remember the first work on the program is Don Juan by Richard Strauss, a tone poem. It's big, it's orchestral. And those first sounds, these kids' eyes opened up and they were glued to the performance right through, not a word, not a thing. So it's new. That's for that group of people. But little people, young people, preschool, they move. You get them to move. And then you say, hey, that's Beethoven. That's not a dog. It's a person, Beethoven. And and they laugh and they move and they go home and they say, hi, you know who Beethoven is? You know, and it's just wonderful. I get the kids all hyped up, and then I give them back to their parents. I say, what'd you do to these kids? They're all on high.
There's a theory out there that if children are exposed to music early and repeatedly, that these are the people you would later in life call musical people. They have skills with music. They love to pursue it. So, boy, it's something we definitely should not take out of the schools.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So, Maestro David, you mentioned to me in the past that one of the key ingredients to conductorcise is learning how to listen. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a lesson in life. And I think music is a wonderful way to sharpen our brain and listen. If I may, I'm always reminded of a wonderful cartoon I saw in the New Yorker magazine. And it's a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. And they're sitting on a couch with champagne in hand, toasting each other. And one says to the other, it really doesn't matter who says what to what, but you'll get the point. One says to the other, excuse me, dear, I wasn't listening. Would you mind repeating everything you said since we got married? Now, it's a joke, but we don't listen in life. There's so many things to listen for, and it's important to listen to the other person. Now, in music, obviously, you listen to the melody. That's the first thing that hits us. But there is so much more going on rhythmically. Other melodies that are on top, things on the bottom. I'm reminded of a work called The Moldau by a wonderful Czech composer called Smetana. It's about the river, Moldau. And it starts up in the mountains with one flute. It's a stream, two flutes, one clarinet, two clarinet, and the stream comes down and forms this beautiful river. And you hear the most beautiful melody, but underneath the melody, just as we have in any river or an ocean, there are undercurrents. And I say, listen for that undercurrent. Listen for this motion underneath the melody. And sometimes when listening, we're not aware of that. So all I do is make them aware of that. I compare it to art. Going into a museum with somebody who really knows paintings, and we look at possibly an abstract painting or maybe something else, and they say, hey, look at that little boat in the corner on the right hand side. Well, we're looking at the canvas and we really don't see that boat. It's there. He draws our attention to it. Oh yeah, I can see that. Or that elusive rooster in the Chagall paintings. Where is it? Well, it's there. Or in a Picasso, look at it. And so in music, we have rhythm, we have color, we have within rhythm that motion that's always there. I'd say, can you hear the piccolos? No, there's the piccolos. Oh, it sounds like a little whistle. And then the brain immediately responds to that where it wouldn't have before in some cases. And music allows us then to really listen with someone who's guiding you through a work. My goodness, I could go on for hours, but everybody or many people who are familiar with classical music know the Beethoven Fifth Symphony. Bop, 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 bop. That first movement based on 4 notes, and 3 of them are the same. And what he does with those 4 notes, and all through the orchestration, color. And that's why I relate music and art so much, because we use the same tools. Color. Every instrument to a composer is a color. And so he thinks, not in all works, but in many works, color. And so I try to draw the attention through listening to these different aspects in music. And I think that does it. And if we would relate that to life, and I'm as guilty as so many, I don't listen. I'm already forming opinions to respond when someone challenges, and instead of listening to them, let them end their thought. I'm already cranking up. How am I going to respond? Music sharpens our brain through really listening. Instruments, the sounds. I say this, what's an oboe? Oh, well, an oboe has a certain quality of sound. You tell a kid, who's this singing on, on a particular word? They'll say, in 2 seconds, they'll say, oh, that's so and so. Well, that's because they heard the sound up here. It's in there. Your ear is so attuned. Oh, don't let me go on forever. Danielle, I have so many thoughts about the ear. I mean, I remember when my father came home, I could hear the door of the car shut. I said, Dad's home. You know, uh, that's instilled in the brain. So is it a big deal for somebody who's been in music to say, oh, that's the Brahms first. Oh, that's Beethoven's this, or that's the overture to that, or whatever. It's the same with kids and how they know their music. Or that's an oboe, that's a bassoon. It has a quality of sound, and that's all in listening. Hey, listen to that nasal sound in the oboe, etc. And forever.
Such a great, like multiple lessons, life lessons on how to be a good listener to people, how to appreciate music and art better by listening, how to be mindful and observe our surroundings. How often do you drive somewhere and not pay attention? Like, hey, how'd I get to the grocery store? And you miss all the trees, the birds singing and everything along the way. So beautiful, beautiful lesson, and a great way to train your brain to be more attentive.
Learn a lot, absolutely learn a lot. Oh my goodness, so many stories. But that's the essence of listening, I feel. Lots of lessons for us to learn.
Well said.
And joyfully.
Yeah. So the last time we talked, you'd mentioned the Whirling Dervishes, and I'll punt it over to you in a moment to talk more about that. But it reminded me of the connection with music and dance. As a former yoga teacher, we would do some repetitive movements and mantras as a way of connecting to something higher than ourselves. Dance has that repetitive movement that's supposed to connect you to the people around you and to the divine. And music has that quality too, of bringing things back around. Can you talk a little bit about that? Share your Whirling Dervish story and some observations of how that repetitiveness might be helping to create more of an awareness around us.
Well, I had heard of the Whirling Dervish, and my story was we were in Toronto for a weekend. We passed the theater that said the Whirling Dervish, and I said, "Wow, let's go in and see what it's all about." So there was an hour and a half with an intermission, and each group, I guess you'd call it, or each work was about 25 minutes long, and all it was were these people whirling around and around. And of course, it's mystical. It creates something in their mind and body that I'm not sure of, but I do know that repetition is something that must be in music. I mean, we have repeats. And why do you have repeats? Well, because that's the way we remember things. You play an introduction in a symphony. It's called the exposition, the statement of themes. Well, you don't play the theme once. You play it twice at least. Then you go on to a second theme, play that twice. And then you go on to a development, which takes those themes and develops them using the material. And then you have a recapitulation, which comes back to the first section, ABA. But repetition in music is extremely important. And I think we mentioned it before. Baroque music in particular, Bach and Vivaldi, Corelli, these people used rhythmic figures over and over again. And that's why they use it in the Parkinson's disease and find that that repetition stimulates that part of the brain that Dr. Rogers mentioned. So that's my experience with repetition, and it's a natural thing. You need it. You need it. Unless you get to minimalism today, and I'm not sure whether I understand it all.
Where the mystical meets the science here, I find it fascinating because, according to Buddhists, when you repeat things, you're mindful, and it kind of puts you in that meditative state, which they believe makes you more receptive to messages from the divine, more intuitive. Right? From a science perspective, we're stimulating our parasympathetic nervous system so that we're more relaxed, our cortisol levels drop, we're really mindful and focused. And I just find it, to me, it's a powerhouse if you have repetitive movement and music. And if you're playing an instrument or singing something along, it's just like this magical combination.
Yeah, all the examples I gave were very up tunes, very lively. I don't always play just stimulating music that way. In fact, I'm going to suggest something for the beginning that's a little slower. This music hits us differently, does exactly what you're saying. Some of that music that I just love, middle movements, especially of Mozart piano concertos, or second movements of symphonies like the Mendelssohn Symphony No. 3 or Tchaikovsky Symphony. They are so beautiful. I say, how does someone think about that? But they're quiet and they're soft and they're melodic. And it does something, which I don't know, this is a medical thing, does something to the body that calms one and brings beauty inside. And boy, do we need that today, especially in this negative world that we're living in and fighting with pandemics and everything else.
Claire de Lune does that. Debussy does that for me.
Exactly.
Just a beautiful thing. My grandson is a musician, and he's in college though, and so we gave him a keyboard for him to take to college with him. And I said, no strings attached, except someday you have to play me Claire de Lune. It could be at my funeral, but he's learned the first part, which is a little easier, and the second part gets to be quite difficult. So he's working it. But you're absolutely right. Even though you make me feel in many ways that I've lived in a cave relative to the depth of music and so much that I don't know about music, but I'm learning from you all the time. In the decades that I've known you, I've learned so much. You've brought me out of the cave, and I think many other people too, with conductor size and everything else you've done.
We all learn, Roger. I'm still learning. It's amazing to me all these years, and I let the serious music in the radio and say, "Wow, I never heard that before." That's beautiful. Or I was doing a program on women composers that go way back to the 16th century, and of course today there's Florence Price that just won an Emmy for one of her symphonies. She's died a number of years ago. Amy Beach. These people, my goodness, there's so much to learn and so much to absorb. Again, the most important thing for all of us is to try and move to this music. Not try. You don't have to try. It's almost a natural thing. I say with the program that the physical part of it is so natural. I don't have to teach anybody how to move. You can move any way you want to. You don't have to do the patterns of a conductor. And then the even more important is what it does to the brain and the body, and how you feel when you leave that room, and want to continue it on hopefully a daily basis.
So let any, sort of embarrassment or anything else that's preventing you from moving, will get, like the sign says, dance as if no one is watching.
Exactly.
I think that's clearly it. Well, as Danielle, we were right. I mean, didn't we think he'd have a whole lot to add to this program that we had? And in fact, he was kind enough to give us a short video that will be embedded in the program. Thank you for that, David. And
That's wonderful.
thank you for your time and all that you have done for us today, before, and for the many, many decades that you've been out there making lives better, improving moods, health, view of the world. And if we could only have more David Dworkins, I think it'd be a much more peaceful world.
You're very kind. I appreciate it very much. And I'm going to continue doing this for.
That's right. We need you. I tell them every time we interact, take care of yourself. You're a national asset.
Before we wrap up, Maestro David, can you tell us how we can learn more about you and your work?
Sure. Well, there is a website, www.conductorsize.com, and you can reach me through that and see some of the background. There's also a Facebook page, Conductor Size Facebook. Just search it. During the pandemic, I put up over 60 videos of all kinds, just for people to observe and move and enjoy. There are YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you can see some examples of the things I've been doing over the years. So I'd be happy to have anyone reach out to me, and I respond right away. So www.conductorsize.com.
Well, great. Thank you, David. We're going to have you back if perhaps before, but at least when the book comes out. We'd love to have you back, talk about that, because that's very special.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm smiling the whole time, and I'm going to smile the rest of the day.
So we. Thank you, David.
Bye-bye now.
Conductor Size, led by Maestro David Dworkin, is a joyous physical exercise that uses the magic of world music and classical music to stimulate the brain and body through movement. It is a flexible and fun way to increase cardio strength, enhance well-being, and improve the mind, body, and spirit through improvisational movement, music, and listening in a way that makes one aware of the colors, motion, and dynamics of music. Learn more at conductorsize.com. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.